Good evening everyone. Myself Manish Anand, assistant teacher of Black Diamond Public School. Now today I am presenting the topic essential of lesson plan in social science. First we discuss about the essential of lesson plan in social science. All teachers require a lesson plan that is thoughtfully prepared regardless of their ability, experience or what their field of training involves. The importance of a lesson plan is emphasized by the need for clarity and comprehension regarding how the entire lesson learning process will be handled, as well as how a student can understand and store the knowledge that is being passed on to them. Lesson plans are necessary for helping students accomplish their goals within a learning environment on a short-term and long-term basis. Studies show the value of envisioning success in order to attain it. Similarly, in a classroom setting, failing to have a lesson plan in a place minimize the prospectus of envisioning certain outcomes and fulfilling your expectations. It is essential for educators to prepare their lesson on a daily basis beforehand and implement the most ideal teaching method. Attending classroom sessions without a lesson plan is determined to teachers and students. When an educator is not properly prepared, they will create the impression of being unprofessional and incompetent among their peers, administrative staff and students. So my friend, my colleagues, lesson plan is so important. Lesson plan is so important in any types of subject. Collections increase engagement, lightness of forehand and self-carriage. The second part of lesson plan is straightness, improved alignment and balance. Third part is impulsion. Impulsion means increased energy and thrust. And the fourth part is lesson plan is connection. Connection is so important between the teacher and the peers. Acceptance of the bit through acceptance of the aids. Next part is relaxation. Relaxations mean elasticity and suppleness. Every lesson plan has a relaxation because relaxation is so important. Relaxation gives the teacher and student elasticity in the subject, particular subject. And the last one is rhythm. Rhythm means energy and tempo. Collection. Lastly, a developed PhD horse should be collected, transfer his weight to his hindquarters round his back and enable his forequarters to move freely to perform athletic maneuvers. Straightness. A PhD horse should display straightness, staying between the rider's lines and legs in all maneuvers. Impulsions. A PhD horse should have impulsion, meaning that the horse is using his hindquarter to provide power and thrust for maneuvers. Contact and connections. Contact and connection mean a PhD horse should be accept the rider's contact, hind leg and seat cues and responded lightly and softly to the rider's requests. Suppleness and relaxation meaning a PhD horse should display lateral and longitudinal suppleness and appear relaxed and happy. And last one is rhythm. Rhythm means a PhD horse should display true gaits, a 4-beat walk, 2-beat trot and a 3-beat canter in a steady and consistent rhythm. Purpose of a lesson plan. Very important part of the lesson plan is the purpose. What is the purpose of lesson plan? Purpose of a lesson plan means a lesson plan serves as a guide that a teacher uses every day to determine what the student will learn, how the lesson will be taught, as well as how learning will be evaluated. Lesson plan is so important. So, lesson plan enables teacher to function more effectively in the classroom by giving a detailed outline that they adhere to during each classes. This helps to make sure that every moment, that this helps to make sure that every moment spent in the class is used to teach meaningful concept and have worthwhile discussions rather than figuring out what you are supposed to do as time goes on. Lesson plan generally consist of essentials components such as objectives, requirements, resources, procedure and evaluation techniques. Since every part of an effective lesson plan has an impact on the learning process for a student, it is crucial to handle them by taking a strategic approach. So, lesson plan is so important. A lesson plan is a vital step toward creating a complete curriculum, because without a lesson plan we cannot complete any type of curriculum properly. Lesson plan is a pioneer, is a path. It delves deeper into the detail to make sure that you provide your student with the right information at an appropriate time, while making your career easier by giving you a clear sense of direction that you can follow each day. So, lesson plan is a very important part of a teaching. It helps to teach any kinds of subject, and in a social science lesson plan is very important to both teacher and as well as student. Next, what is the importance of lesson plan in teaching? The lesson plan in teaching is very important. The basis of creating a lesson plan is the objective of learning and giving learners a chance to discover, establish and demonstrate what they are taught. It facilitates a learning environment that focuses on the class as a whole rather than concentrating on the teacher. All effective teachers have a plan that they consider when they deliver training. The lesson plan may be a simple list or a more complex system that is structured and detailed. Lesson plan are essential tools that teachers develop to guide their training sessions. So, lesson plan is a tool. Lesson plan is a tool of teacher that will help the teacher to make any kinds of subject easier in the classroom. They are properly planned, prepared and executed to achieve specified learning outcomes. A conventional lesson plan usually consists of details pertaining to the lesson, the outcomes that will address and the method that will be used, as well as the materials and activities that will be included to engage and evaluate the students. The last part of a lesson plan deal with the assessment session from both the teacher and the student standpoints. Having a lesson plan that has been carefully constructed for every lesson boosts your confidence and maximize the possibility of having purposeful learning session with your students whenever you enter the classroom. It equips you with a general outline of your goal and the thing you need to achieve them. Yes, when a lesson plan is productive, it not only refers to everything going according to your plan, it also ensures that teachers and students learn from each other. Reflecting on lesson plan after every class gives teacher ins- reflecting on lesson plan after every class gives teacher insight into what worked effectively and the reasons why, in addition to what could have been handled in a different way. This makes it possible to adjust to unexpected occurrence in the classroom and make changes to the lesson plan when necessary. Importance of lesson plan in social science. While social science may appear to be an easy subject for teachers due to its factual and logical content, in reality it can be very challenging to teach social science. Even the most highly trained and experienced teacher will be overwhelming if they do not have a lesson plan. In order for the student to understand what they are being taught, a lesson plan is a critical part of the process that determines how the topic will be delivered during the class period. This type of plan should ideally be based on how students comprehend concepts and retain them after the lesson is completed. Teaching SST, teaching social science, is an extremely rewarding experience when the learning process is successful. Social science lessons are complicated as teachers not only have to provide extensive knowledge, they are also responsible for dispelling various types of myths. Students are expected to consider other perspectives of the world and be receptive to concepts that defy logic. This is why a social science lesson plan should be planned carefully to make sure it is effective instead of ending up with confusion. It is also important to structure social science lesson plans in the form of relatable stories that make the teaching procedure clear and worthwhile. When lesson plans are organized, students can visualize much more, and in case they get lost along the way, they will be able to get back on track. There are several ways to implement lesson planning for social science, but regardless of the approach that you choose to take, the goal is to plan lessons that will allow students to make great progress. Studies show that the teacher is the most important factor that affects a student's achievements. According to research carried out on 60,000 learners. Some of the important essential or elements of a good lesson plan in social science are in the following. A lesson plan must be in written form. One of the important qualities of a good lesson plan is it should be written. It works as a guide for teacher to what he will teach, how he will teach, which method is to be used in the classroom, etc. are mentioned in the lesson plan. So without a written form of a lesson plan, the teacher may puzzle during the teaching. Thus a good lesson plan is always to be written, not in the mind of the teacher. Second, clear about the aims and objectives. Another essential qualities of a good lesson plan is that it should state that aims and objectives which is to be achieved by the teaching. The general objectives and the specific objectives both should be clearly mentioned in the lesson plan to be an effective good lesson plan of social science. Third, it must be linked with previous knowledge of students. A lesson plan is effective when it linked to the previous knowledge of the student in class. The teacher should design a lesson plan in social science by keeping in mind the level of students' psychology, standard ability, their previous knowledge, understanding capacities, so that it sustains the interest and motivates the students. So a lesson plan must be related to the previous lessons taught. Well arranged subject matter and teaching aids. It is the another essential of a good lesson plan in social science. A teacher uses various materials of teaching aids. All the teaching aids which is to be used in the classroom should select and organized well, and also the subject matter for teaching should be mentioned and systematically organized in lesson plan. It should be flexible, meaning another good quality of a lesson plan in social science is flexibility. It should be flexible and not the rigid one. The method and techniques to be used by the teacher may change as per situations. Flexibility helps to keep the students engaged in teaching learning process. It should indicate the techniques of teaching. A lesson plan must clearly indicate the techniques of teaching to be adopted by the teacher, like the techniques of presentation of the lesson, method to be followed, questions to be asked, and the illustrations to be used, etc. It should show the question to ask. A lesson plan must include the question to be asked at the end of the lesson plan and the problem to be solved. It should contain the reference or reading. A good lesson plan in social science include the reference for further reading which motivates student for extra reading. What are the benefits of lesson plan in social science? Benefits of the lesson plan in social science is providing guidance to teacher, clarifying the learning objective for teachers, improving the quality of lessons, enabling visualizations of the entire teaching process, and the next one is making learning easier for students. So the benefits of the lesson plan is the 5 points. Next, lesson planning. A lesson plan is defined by good defined lesson plan as outline of the important points of a lesson arranged in the order in which they are to be presented to students by the teacher. For a successful and effective teaching, planning is the first and the most important step. The teacher should know beforehand what to teach and how to teach. He should have the clear aim of the lesson before him and should plan accordingly. He should know how he should introduce and present the lesson and the aids he will make uses of in the classroom. He should also know how to evaluate the lesson in the light of the aim set. A lesson plan, in the word of Lesser B stands, that is, is actually a lesson plan of action. It therefore includes the working philosophy of the teacher, his knowledge of philosophy, his information about and understanding of his pupils, his comprehension of the objective of education, his knowledge of the material to be taught, and his comprehension of the objective of education, his knowledge of the material to be taught, and his abilities to utilize effective materials. Advantages of lesson planning. It gives the teacher to be systematic and orderly in the treatment of the subject matter. He proceeds on well thought of and definite lines and does not follow haphazard and thoughtless teaching. The teacher sets forth with some definite aims in view and is conscious of the interest, attitude, etc. that he is to develop in the student through certain activities or some other means. Planning a lesson give confidence and self-reliance to the teacher, which is of great value for successful teaching. It saves time because the lesson is correlated with the social and physical environments of the students. Their interest is maintained throughout the lesson. Steps involved in lesson planning. Some steps in lesson plan is preparation or introduction, second, presentation, third, comparison or association, fourth, generalization, fifth, application, sixth, recapitulation. These are the steps in lesson plan in the social science. First step of lesson plan in social science is preparation. The teacher must prepare the student to receive new knowledge. Knowledge is to be linked with the previous knowledge of the student. Teachers come inside the class and ask some questions to the student to check the pre-knowledge of the student. Preparation in fact means the exploration of the pupil's knowledge, which leads to the aim of the lesson. Teacher's skill lies in leading the pupils to see that their knowledge is incomplete and that to conquer lies before them. This can be done by testing of the previous knowledge of pupils and introducing the lesson with an explanation. First, teacher has to ask some easy questions to the students, and after the easy question, teacher has to ask some moderate and hard question to the student to check the pre-knowledge of the student. By asking questions that may reveal their ignorance, arouse interest and curiosity to learn the new matter. Through the use of chart, maps or pictures in social science is very important, because without the chart paper, maps, picture, demonstration, lesson plan not work totally. Through a skillful conversation, it should be noted that this step should not in any case take more than 5 minutes. Second one is presentation. Presentation is very important in lesson plan in social science Before the presentation of the subject matter, the aim of the lesson should be clearly stated. By this, teacher as well as the student are engaged upon a common pursuit. In the presentation step, the pupil or student must get some new ideas, and pupil should be the active participant in the teaching learning process. The teacher should try to introduce everything from the learner. Sort of heuristic attitude should prevail the whole teaching. Questioning should form an important device of this step. Other aids should also be used to make the lesson more interesting and comprehensive. Blackboard summary should be developed along with. Third step of lesson plan in social science is comparison or association. Some examples are given to the students and they are asked to observe carefully and compare them with other set of the example and facts. This step is important where some definition or some generalization is to be induced from the student. Fourth step involved in lesson planning in social science is generalization. In this step, the aims of the lesson plan in social science is achieved. This step involves reflecting, thinking, because the whole knowledge learned in preparation is to be systemized, which leads to generalization, formula, rules, etc. through comparison or association. This step completes the inquiry by providing the answer to the problem with which it began. Thus, the student gets a new knowledge which is ready for me. The fifth step of lesson plan is application. At this stage, the student make use of the acquired knowledge in familiar and unfamiliar situations. In this way, the new knowledge gained by the pupils will become permanent in the mind of the students and will not fade from consciousness soon. Now, let's watch this video, components of lesson plan in social science. So, enjoy you all to this video of components of lesson plan.
Namaste students. In this session, we will discuss about the component of lesson planning. As you know, in any teacher education program, planning for teaching and planning for learning activities and planning for evaluation activity becomes very essential. If you plan meticulously, then you can execute it very precisely and we are assured of attaining the objectives of the activities. So, it is in this context the lesson plans very meticulously. So, let us try to see how this component of lesson planning are there and what are the procedure we need to follow. So, it is the format is presented on your screen. So, it is the lesson plan contains two parts. The first part is the preliminary part of the lesson planning, and the second part tells us how we are going to execute the lesson plan as we have intended. So now the first part of the lesson plan. So as you can see on the screen, the first part of the lesson plan gives you the basic description of what you intend to deliver in a prescribed class period. So it is in this context, the first part of the lesson plan format indicates that the student teacher should indicate which is the class or standard that is going to engage, which is the subject knowledge he is going to deal with, and which is the topic that is going to deal with, and what is the day and time of the exact class is indicated as a preliminary information. Enables the student's teacher to be more specific and more precise in his approach towards which class he is dealing, which subject he is dealing, and what is the duration of his interaction with the class, with the knowledge and with the situations. So this component enables him to visualize the classroom management process, the time management perspective also. So once these components are specified, then the second part of the first component itself indicates what are the various components one needs to indicate and what are those factors which enables to reflect upon your planning perspective. The first component is writing of learning objectives. So here learning takes place in context with the subject knowledge. So keeping the subject knowledge in the background, the teacher has to enable the learner to learn that subject knowledge through the design learning activities that he has created. So in the process, he should enable the learner to go up from the remembering stage of cognitive process objective up to the creative level of objective. Stating a precise, specific, measurable and achievable learning objectives becomes essential. So in short form, we say you have to write a SMART objectives. So the teacher has to look into from remembering level to what extent he can lead his learner to go up the cognitive learning ladder. So can he able to take the learner from remembering level which he has already possessed to application level, to analysis level, evaluation level or creative level. So that can be visualized by how a teacher has visualized the content and how he has looked into achieving those objectives in terms of the way he has stated them. Instead the student teacher to write the learning objectives in keeping in mind the characteristics of a good learning objectives. So the objectives says that it should have two parts. One is the content part, another is the action part. The action part appears when the learning situation is created around the content part. So therefore, how the teacher has visualized the content and the learning process and the learning activities that he has created, and if the learner is involved in the learning process, how he is going to realize this intended objective. By browsing through the kind of objective a teacher has listed out, one can visualize how a teacher is attempting to take the learner along the cognitive process learning ladder. An overall view about how a teacher has visualized the content that is going to deal for a stipulated time period and how he is intending to achieve that through various learning activities. So it is in that level, so we can see that the teacher either is aiming the learner to reach the application level or to the analysis level or to the evaluation level or to the creative level. So by glancing through the learning objectives, one can visualize the teacher intention of leading the learner along the learning ladder. Next point is listing out the teaching point or the major concepts of the lesson. A lesson of 40 minutes may have one teaching point or it may have more than one teaching point. Again, the teaching points are categorized based on the nature of the knowledge itself. The knowledge may be categorized as factual knowledge, conceptual knowledge, procedural knowledge, or a metacognitive knowledge. So therefore, how a teacher has visualized the content categorization and how he is going to transform those kinds of knowledge that he is going to deal with in the classroom can be listed out. If he is supposed to teach concepts in the class, so how many concepts one can deliver? So depending upon those kind of knowledge that he is going to deal with, so he can decide to teach one or two content knowledge. If he is going to deal with a procedural knowledge activity, then he can think about fixing his teaching concept to derivation of one of those procedures involved in the process itself, followed by application of this process in a given context. So depending upon the nature of knowledge that is going to deal with, so one has to make a decision and accordingly has to state how many teaching points or how many concepts he is going to deal with in a given time period. So that needs to be spelled out very precisely under the heading the learning points or the teaching points are the major concepts of the lesson. The next component is writing a focus question. So this focus question is a very comprehensive and a broader question covering many teaching points which are involved for a particular lesson. So it can be an overreaching question cutting across all teaching points of the given topic. So teacher must write a overreaching focus question on a given topic or a lesson that he has chosen to deliver. Necessary that to write focus question for the topic that you have considered. The next is, now since we are emphasizing that learning should be treated as a process rather than as a product, so much emphasis must be given on the process oriented activities. So it is in that context, what is the process skills that are involved in the learning of the given lesson is to be visualized. Now for example, observation is a process skill, handling of operators is a process skill, reading from the instrument is a process skill, drawing the diagram precisely is a process skill, and taking a reading from an instrument is a process skill. Applying all the readings into a formula and finding out solution is also a process skill. So depending upon the kind of subject knowledge that you are dealing with, you must be in a position to highlight which is that process skills you are aiming at a student has to imbibe in the process of learning. So it is necessitated that you need to write at least 1, 2 or 3 process skills which you think which are very prominent in this entire learning process need to be focused, and only those things needs to be listed out, to listing out the previous knowledge of the lesson. This becomes very important aspect because without assessing the prior knowledge which is required to know the present knowledge that you are going to present in the classroom context, you cannot plan for further activities. So making a preliminary assessment of what learner already knows becomes very essential. So therefore, for a given topic or a chosen topic for the lesson that you have to be delivered, so a student teacher has to list out what are the prerequisites of the learning required for this present topic. Now for example, if I want to teach a quadrilateral in mathematics, my prerequisite for learning the concept of quadrilateral is a student must know what a point is, what a straight line is, and what a closed region is. So keeping these as my prerequisite, I can build upon these ideas and enable him to come to arriving at knowing a new knowledge. So therefore, linking the previous learned knowledge with the present knowledge and bridging that gap is what learning is all about. So therefore, as a student teacher, you should be able to visualize what is the essential prerequisite knowledge one should have already acquired to assimilate and to understand the presented knowledge. So in that context, the prerequisite knowledge, listing of them becomes topmost priority. So it is in that context, so listing of prerequisite knowledge is also very much essential. And the next component is listing of learning resources required. So here the student teacher has to list out what are the learning resources that he is going to make use of in the actual classroom context, and how these resources are going to bring in some varieties in the teaching learning process, and how it is able to reduce the abstractness of the ideas that are presented in terms of knowledge, and how he is going to link those ideas with already acquired ideas, and how he is going to bridge those and make a new ideas. So it is in that context, so using of varieties of learning resources and knowing about learning resources and using them optimally in a given context is very much essential. The student teachers are expected to list out the learning resources that he or she is intending to use in a given context. So these must be written in the learning resources heading. So when a teacher or a teacher educator looks into the first page of the lesson plan, so it gives the overall picture of what the teacher is likely to do in the classroom. So my lesson planning enables me to visualize the actual class that ought to be. So therefore my planning is the teacher's visualization of entire classroom processes, and how he is going to think that he is going to implement that in the actual classroom situations can be seen by going through the first page of the lesson plan component. Now we will go to the second part of the lesson plan component. So where we have got 4 column lesson plan presentations. So here we have 4 columns which runs both horizontally and vertically. So in writing of lesson plan, so we use this 4 column lesson plan format. So whatever it has been written in the first page, it gives the overall view, and the continuously running pages will show us how exactly the plans that have been visualized in the front position is going to be executed in the subsequent pages. So it is this component which helps us to visualize how we are going to execute it. The first column of the lesson plan has the introductory part or the different phases of the lesson, and the second column is the teacher initiative, and the third column is the students learning activities, and the fourth column is the assessment or the blackboard work. So it has got these 4 columns and it has got 4 headings, and now we need to see how this format has to be filled in both horizontally as well as vertically also. So therefore arranging the content knowledge, integrating the learning resources, integrating the learning activity, integrating the learning assessment all becomes a process. We say that planning is a science. It is to be done very systematically. So therefore let us try to understand how these columns need to be filled up in systematic way. Now first let us try to understand what we are supposed to write in the first column. So which talks about the phases of lesson. So we have changed the format of lesson plan format that we used to use earlier by making certain modification in our lesson plan format. So since we are adopting the 5E model of writing lesson plan, so all the 5 E's that are to be explicitly written in the first column. So therefore you can see in the first column, so all the 5 E, the phases of 5E lesson plan model is listed out. The first E of the 5E is engage phase. So which in earlier lesson plan format we used to treat it as an introduction. So here in the engage phase, the learner has to be engaged in terms of the subject knowledge, in terms of learning activity, in terms of learning experiences that is provided. So therefore it is in this context the students has to be engaged mentally, and through the mental engagement, through varieties of activities, through varieties of linking process, one needs to construct the knowledge. So it is in that perspective the engagement phase in the beginning becomes very, very crucial. So here the learner has to be motivated, interest has to be generated, and that interest has to be sustained for 30 or 40 minutes of the class. These attention, interest and motivations are drawn and student is aroused to new learning situations, then the learning can take place and we can keep the learner in the learning cycle for a minimum period of time. So it is in that context engagement becomes very, very prominent. So in this engagement phase, we need to test the prerequisite knowledge that has been listed out in the front page of the lesson plan. So we should assure whether what you have assumed the learner has already has he attained it or not. If not, then how do I supplement those information and leading to a new learning? So this has to be addressed in the engage phase. So therefore all the listed out items under prerequisite knowledge can be brought into testing condition in engagement phase, and the teacher can engage the learner through varieties of modes. Play ideas and skill and try to implement it to the new situation, and in the process they may come out with some modifications, some deviations and some other new way of dealing with things, and they may able to come out with the new learning product. So it is in that context a teacher should create a phase and a situation with relation to the content knowledge that he is going to deliver. In that context the learner should have an opportunity to explore on his own. So whenever he is exploring, and if some learner has got any difficulty in exploring procedures, there the teacher can step in and provide the support that is required to the child by acting as a facilitator. And the next phase is the explanation phase, where the teacher is going to explain the various interrelatedness or various phenomena or various complexities that are involved in the entire concept or the teaching point that is going to present or is going to discuss in the class. So it is those phenomena are to be taken for explanation phase. And the next phase comes, it is the review phase, where the teacher, after completing the delivery of his teaching points or the delivery of its major concept that he has intended to deliver, if that is completed in a given time span, then he needs to review, or it is also known as he is going to evaluate. So where the teacher is going to evaluate whether the kind of learning activities that he has given, the learning experiences that he has provided, has it yielded the intended result. So through this intended result, will he able to assure that the stated learning objectives are attained or not. So to do those activities, he is going to go for review of the entire lesson before closure of it. So in that process, the teacher may do it in varieties of ways. So it is in that way the another E is also tested. The last is the assignment. So we will be able to correlate the ideas with the different context and different situations. So that needs to be seen in terms of assignment. The another E is the application of the knowledge, or which is the extension of the knowledge, which can also be imbibed in the developmental phase of the lesson itself. So there itself, once the knowledge transacted meaningfully in a classroom situation, and its problematic situations may be created, designed, so that a student can test whether his acquired knowledge is able to transfer it to a given situation or not. So thereby he is able to apply his understanding of the subject and demonstrating it through its application in a given context. So these all phases of lessons has to be shown across all the 4 columns of the lesson plan format. How that deliberation happens and how his teacher is visualizing and able to put it into action is to be looked into. So therefore, in the second column you are going to write the teacher initiatives. So that is what all the initiative teacher takes it up and makes the class by varieties of activities is called as teacher initiative. For example, teacher may draw something on the blackboard for as an initiative activity, or he may ask oral question to the whole of the class. So that can also be initiative activity. So there are, in the entire process of 30 to 40 minutes duration, the teacher has varieties of opportunity where he can take initiative and stimulate the student and make the learners to be part in the learning process. So it is all the activities the teacher carries out in the classroom are to be listed out under teacher initiative column. So when the teacher is performing varieties of activities which acts as a stimulus to the students. So when the stimulus is provided, it is quite natural that there must be a corresponding response received from the learner side. So therefore, a student learning activity is also written there, and therefore all the responses that are given in the third columns are going to be listed out under student initiate learning activities. If a teacher asks a question on a particular topic, the student is going to respond to that question in a meaningful manner. So as the teacher creates those situations, simultaneously the learner also gives the appropriate responses. We are as a teacher, we are stimulating the learner and appropriately you are receiving the response from the learners. If this stimulus learning responses are strengthened, SR bond is strengthened, then as per Thorndike, then he says this bonding of stimulus and response is the learning. So therefore, linking of all the knowledges the students has already acquired, using those ideas to the given present context and enabling him to come out with the new ideas and bridging them and enhancing their learning bondings is what the learning outcomes are. So it is in those initiatives the student will demonstrate what the actions or responses he is going to give. So all those things that has been observable, which are measurable, which are being performed by the students are going to be listed out under the student initiative column. So in the last column, it is the assessment or it is the blackboard work. So here whatever the teacher is going to write on the blackboard, which are written with intentions, that needs to be written on the blackboard column. Like for example, major teaching point. So once he introduces that, the teacher has to write it in one side of the board. And if he is defining it and is coming out with the definition, the exact definition has to be written on the blackboard, so that students are able to take a note of it and also carry forward these learning activities whenever they require. So therefore, these kinds of activities are to be written under blackboard work. Also, we are involving continuous comprehensive evaluation in the teaching learning process. So therefore, a teacher used to adopt CCE means, so he should able to know and how to use the CCE very effectively in the classroom. So this activity has to be indicated in the last column by asking a question or providing a situation followed by a question can be visualized, and the teacher has to write what kind of particular question or activity is designed to test the knowledge at a given point of time has to be clearly indicated in the assessment column. It is initiated and it is necessitated that after the completion of one teaching point, a teacher has to write a compulsorily one evaluation question. So thereby he is able to realize whether the intended learning point has been learnt by the learner or not. If not, he can modify his teaching learning strategies, bring in varieties into that, simplify these ideas present to the learner and carry forward in his learning process. So therefore, it gives ample opportunity for the teachers to make mid-core correction during the teaching learning process itself, and if the same process is continued at the end in terms of revision also, it enables him to assure that whether the intended learning objectives have been attained or not. So it is in that context. So we are using both formative assessment as it occurs during the development of the ideas, and also we are using the summative assessment before the closure of the lesson. We are using both formative and summative assessment procedure in the entire assessment process. The teacher has to visualize, and he should have a clear idea about what kind of assessment he is doing at what level, and accordingly he has to frame a relevant and appropriate question and must be written in the assessment column. So it is in these four columns a student teacher is expected to write his execution of the lesson plan. You can also visualize that whatever the component is listed out in column 1 has its relationship with column 2, column 3 and column 4. So that is ending with assessment. So in column 1 the content is selected or the teaching point is listed out, and in the column 2 it shows how a teacher has created the learning situations through by asking questions or by doing a group activity or by showing a chart or by giving a model. So how this activity has been created, and to that created activity how the learner is expected to react is also written in the column 3 under student learning activities. So when learning activities, intended learning activities provided and the students are responding to those activities, then learning has to realized. So that therefore an assessment question.
I hope this video session will help you to understand the components of lesson plan in social science. Conclusion of the components of lesson plan in social science is all teachers need to maximize the importance of a lesson plan to enhance how they educate their learners. A lesson plan works like a map that directs you on how to cover different topics within the curriculum and serves as an amazing tutorial tool. Through lesson plan, teachers can understand what is expected from the lesson and enable the student to understand their objectives. Finally, Davis says nothing is so fatal for a teacher as unpreparedness. Thank you.